Welcome back, everybody. In this week's video, we are going to go over how I set up my wheel throwing area so it can hopefully improve your setup to make it more efficient and effective. So if that's something that you want to see, stick around and find out how we do it. So to start off this video, I set up my pottery wheel a little differently than most people. And that's from years of throwing and understanding how my body moves and how to make it so that I don't need to bend over as much or stand up or move to grab things. And so the first thing that I want to talk about is just my general wheel setup when I am throwing more production style. And some of the things in this video is going to be similar to the ergonomic video that I'll include in the description below, but we won't go over everything as in depth. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just more or less how I lay everything out in front of me. So the first thing that I have is I have a stool here with a black big plastic board. Doesn't really matter what you put on it, but I have my container of water, some of my tools, and my sponge here so that I can easily grab it and then add water without having to lean over as much. I have my tool holder here where I can grab and go very easily. And then I actually put a piece of newspaper down on the splash pan so that when I throw and I'm done, I easily just take this and I crumple it up. And so when I have to wipe things down, usually this area is more or less clean. So cleanup becomes a little faster. And so that general setup is something that I adjusted over a few years, and this is kind of how I like it. Now the wheel itself, you notice that it is higher up. It's around my belly button. So if I scoot back, you can see that the wheel is on two different bricks. So that's about 4 inches tall. And then I set this shimple wheel up to the highest setting that I can because you can change the leg heights. So I put it all the way down so it's higher than your standard wheel height. And that allows me to be able to sit at the wheel a little more upright, so it's less pressure on my back and I don't have to hunch over as much. Another thing that you may notice is I have a brick here so that my left foot can go on it, so that when I'm sitting at the wheel, I have my legs at the same height, which you can't see on the camera, and that way I'm more or less balanced when I throw. And the last thing is, because the wheel is higher up, whenever I need to center and lean and brace, my hand is resting on the splash pan instead. Now I know that was a lot of information all at once, but you can pick and choose how you want to set up your wheel to make it more efficient for your body, and this is the way that I like it. Now one thing on the tool holder, this is 3D printed, and so you can see a little close up. You can see that it has slots for 3 tools. Now, I know not everybody has access to a 3D printer, and so the easier way to make this is out of a pool noodle, which I will show a short clip right now. So to make your tool caddy, you're gonna need a pool noodle and a X-Acto knife or a box cutter. And what we're doing is we're gonna be cutting this to the length you want your tool caddy to be, and then we're gonna slit the bottom open so that this hollow core here is then split, and that will go over your splash pad. So you could get a pencil, you could get a ruler to visually mark it, or you can just cut it by eye. And so I wanted about 5 inches, and from my thumb to the tip of my finger is 5 inches. So I put it over there, right around here is 5. So I'm gonna get the box cutter ready and start cutting over here. And just kind of go in a circle, cut. And then from here, just slice where it's still connected. And then I have my more or less prep piece, and then I just slice it down the middle until it's cut all the way through. And then I put it on my splash pan. And depending on how many tools you want to put, you put how many slits. And so let's say we want a tool here, we make a slit, tool here, make a slit, and a tool here, make a slit. And whenever you're ready, you just grab your tools. In this case, I'll put it here. I got some various tools here that I can use. And so you just put the tool in the slit so it locks down. And needles you can just stab, and that way you can easily grab and go. And if the tool is not deep enough, you can slit this, get this a little closer. You can slit this a little deeper. Or you can cut a little notch in it by removing some more material, but not too much. just so that's a little wider. And that way when you put your tool in there, it can fit a little better. But still not going all the way that I want, so I'm gonna put a little more here, a little deeper. And you just play around with it until the tools more or less fit how you like it. So more or less fits. Trimming tools as well can fit. Wooden spoon. So Bob's your uncle. Put whatever tools you want that fits into your caddy. All right, but for now I use that. And then the benefit of using the pool noodle is if it gets wet, it won't disintegrate because of course it's meant for the pool. You usually just wash it in between sessions. So that's how I set up my area, but I'm gonna take this off and I'm just gonna quickly go over how I get this newspaper down. So let's get rid of it first so you guys can see how I do it. And so you can see that it was already used a little bit. There's some old clay, I'll just crumple that up. And then let's get a new piece so that you guys can see how we set it up. All right, so to set it up, I call this a full sheet of newspaper because it's a big square. And then when you receive it, it's normally in this folded square, at least in the US. So what I do is I open it up so it's a rectangle, and then I refold it to basically match the length of the pottery wheel top triangular section. So from here all the way down to under the splash pan. So I open it up and then I just fold over this flap a little bit. You don't need to fold over much. Crease that down. And then when I bring it back, I flip it so that the fold is facing me. I place it on the table and then I kind of just lift this splash pan up and then I wiggle it into place. So right there. And so I can put more tools here. I can put my water here if I want. And if it gets wet and dirty, I just, at the end of the session, throw it away. And it's one less thing to worry about. And then one more thing that I like to add to my throwing, besides my throw water, is I have a little container that I then put my clay sludge or clay parts that come off my wheel throwing, and that I usually leave on the newspaper. And so the reason why I like keeping it separate than my throw water is I normally have a designated spot to put my throw water, and I have a designated spot to put this slip. And so if I keep it separate, I don't add excess water to this. I can let this dry out a little quicker and I can re-knead that and get it back into throwable condition in one day, usually, sometimes within a few hours. And then the throw water, I can let it settle and then siphon out that. So now let's go to the next area to show you how I have those things set up. And you guys can hopefully maybe take something from it to add it to your studio so that you can add extra steps to the cleanup that make it easier to then process your clay. All right, so for our classroom, next to a sink, I have 2 plaster boards set up that I will then add any soft clay that come off to it. And you can see on the boards itself, I have some soft clay drying here. I have a bigger block that I lifted up and it's propped up. And so when I have my students finish throwing, they take their sludge that's not in their container water, they scoop it out, and then they place it on the plaster board till it can start drying. I also have a fan set up right there so I can have that then dry this out so that the plaster can continually dry. And one thing about the plaster, I do recommend if you do this setup, you have it elevated so that air can go underneath rather than completely flat on a surface. And you can see that this is a very messy area. And so I have this area cleaned about every other class so that all this stuff doesn't build up. And then lastly, I have a bucket here where all the students put their and pour their throw water in here. And so what happens is as that bucket settles, the water flows to the top, and then I siphon off that water and I pour it, and then I kind of move it from one bucket to another. And so I take all that sludge anyway and put it over there. And so that's my basic setup, at least for this. And you can easily, if you have a home studio, move these plaster boards to your wheel area. So if you have sludge that comes off your throwing, you just take that and put it directly on the plaster board. And hopefully by the time you're done throwing, that clay will be dry enough so that you can start kneading it up. And so to explain, for those who may not know, These plaster boards are very porous and they will pull moisture out of the clay really quickly compared to other materials. And if you ever heard of plaster molds or people mass producing clay pieces with slip and plaster, that's basically this, but in a form shape. So we use it as a drying board, and that's what I like to do. And then for cleanup, this is how we set up our sinks in our studio. We have a bucket in the sink that we wash all the dirty things over it so that it collects the clay and it doesn't go down the drain. And then underneath the sink, we have a trap system that collects all the clay, and it's transparent so you can see how high the clay is. And when this black line, that's where the clay currently is, gets a little higher, I will change this out and replace it with another bottle here. And so this trap system is called the Glico trap. And if you would like to see another video on how I empty it and how I like it, so basically a review, let me know in the comments below. And we do like this. And there's a lot of people online that think this is not the best, but the way we use it, we only need to change this out, at least the small ones, once every half a year. And then the other ones have this bigger bottle. This is double the size. We change this out once a year. So that's why we like using the bucket system, because we actually collect most of our clay in here. And going back to our sink system, I have a little caddy here that I put some sponges so I can easily use this to scrub. And then the benefit of putting a bucket in the sink is, number one, if you have a trap system, you don't have to change the trap out as much because this collects about 90% of the clay. And you end up reducing the amount of water you use because you can use the water in here to clean your objects and then do a clean rinse, and all the clay in here that comes off your pieces, it settles to the bottom. And usually if you wait 24 hours, you can pour the water off from this, and then all that clay at the bottom, you can then recycle and reuse. So it's very self-sustaining, it is eco-friendly, and it just reduces the amount of things you need to do later on. But anyway, I have some dirty things here. So the way to use this, if there's water in it already, and not run clean water to clean all your tools, you just drop your dirty tools in the bucket and then use the bucket water to then do a first rinse. And so I kind of wipe down everything. And if you don't want to do a clean rinse at this point, like honestly, this is pretty clean in itself. You just take it and drop it into the dish rack, and then you repeat that. So this reduces water wasting. This helps to contain all your clay that you can reuse later, and it's just more eco-friendly. And then to clean this, I basically, if I can, dunk it in, get it wet. And then same thing, use that bucket water to wipe as much of the clay off as possible so that it collects. The bucket collects all that water. And then all that clay, because it's your hard-earned money, you can then siphon off that water, dry out the clay, and then recycle it. And so later on, if you folks want to see a video on how I reclaim all our clay so that we don't throw away our precious, expensive material, I can go ahead and make a video for that. But anyway, this is pretty clean. I could do a clean rinse if I want. And then try to have all the water fall into there. And then put it in the dish rack to then dry. And so the benefits of these bucket systems are so great. And if you pair it with a trap system like we have under the sink, then even more so the benefits grow, because the odds of you clogging your drain are very low. But if you don't have a trap system in the bottom of your sink, I highly recommend a bucket system, because you can easily pour this water when it settles down the sink because there's no clay in it, and all the settlement you just either let it dry out and throw away, or you recycle it back into your normal clay throwing. So that is the sink setup. And then one thing, once your hands are more or less clay free, I make sure I move the bucket out of the way, turn the water on, and then I can go ahead and wash it with soap and water. So that way I don't get soap contaminated into my bucket water. So the main takeaway with buckets in the sink, use the water in the bucket to conserve the amount of water you use, and then it'll collect all the clay that comes off your dirty tools. And it's just a little more eco-friendly as a whole. I hope you enjoyed those tips and tricks and the setup that I like to do that makes my throwing, my cleanup, and my recycling more efficient. If there are any tips or tricks that you guys have, let me know in the comments below because I want to hear what they are so maybe I can adapt them into my throwing processes. Before I sign off, I want to give a big mahalo or thank you to the 8 people who are now Mud Club members. And I want to give a shout out to the 1 member who is a Mud Club plus, and that is Pamela K. Jameson 4212. So thank you very much. And the benefits of being a Mud Club plus member is you get number 1, a shout out at the end of the videos just like this, and number 2, you get to talk to me one-on-one on social media. You can send me videos, you can send me pictures about your throwing, and we can have a conversation. I can give you some feedback on how you're doing and where to improve. And number 3, you get a curated list of videos that are organized to help you better find what you want to watch and what you want to improve on, rather than trying to scroll through my huge list of videos that are not the most organized. And as a regular Mud Club member, that is your way in showing support to this channel, and that helps me to then create more robust, interesting, and engaging content for you guys so I can keep on and making cool videos for everybody. So thank you and mahalo, and I will see you folks, hopefully as members, in the next video.